I was away again for 3 months, from June to August 2023, working as Relief Chief Officer on the same large private yacht as before. The vessel's plans had changed, as they do, from Norway to French Polynesia instead. This vessel had had me back several times since 2021, always offering new adventures and new challenges. After well over a decade in the industry, finally making it to the South Pacific felt like the pinnacle of my career and a dream come true. Tuna fishing in the Marquesas, reconnaissance dive explorations in the Tuamotu atolls, visiting Tahiti and Moorea, and finally witnessing and filming the Olympic surfing trials at Chopu from the channel. It truly was a dream realized. Of course, work at sea always comes with challenges, and by the end my heart was longing to return home. I returned to South Africa a bit earlier than planned due to my grandmother's passing. My mom had been caring for her at home since the pandemic and did an exceptional job. Coming home was bittersweet. I was leaving paradise and saying goodbye to my beloved Oma, with whom I was very close. Yet it was also joyful to reunite with my family, and of course, with Elaine. I knew then, and still know now, that choosing to build and settle in Amidst was the right decision. There really is no place like home. In September 2023, the rain came, and it didn't stop. It was recorded as being a 1 in 200 year flood, damaging bridges, roads, and even submerging much of the nearby town of Stanford. Our beach at Amidst, where we surf and where Elaine and I met, looked like a scene from a tsunami disaster movie. Black water, debris, huge logs and reeds everywhere. The cleanup would take months, mostly community funded. Worst of all, the old sewer line running through the river broke, polluting both the river and the ocean. We looked on the bright side. The water had cleared away the reeds and left us with more of our land being accessible, thus making future maintenance easier. We also gained a clear understanding of the realities of flooding, and were reassured that our house would be fine even in such an event. The house was designed to be built above a 1 in 50 year floodline, which was still well above where this apparent 1 in 200 year flood reached. I'm not sure how they determine these parameters, but we knew we would be fine. The floods caused widespread delays in the building industry, but as we were still waiting on building approval, our schedule remained unaffected. In fact, we got lucky again. With the sewer line damaged, the municipality brought in large diggers to the river. One day, during Elaine's lunch break, he went to chat with the digger driver, who happened to be parked right next to our plot. We'd had a large tree felled a while back, but the root system was still intact. Long story short, the driver made quick work of it, ripping the roots out in 5 minutes and saving us significant time and money. In October 2023, Elaine took me on a road trip up the East Coast and proposed, while we stayed at a small eco-lodge near Wilderness. With all the excitement, I don't think we fully grasped what we were taking on. Building a house, planning a wedding, living with the in-laws, and on top of that, having Elaine's father as the builder. Some might say it was a recipe for disaster. Time will tell. By the end of 2023, as the holidays approached, we were still waiting on our waiver application. The bureaucratic process had already taken over 5 months, and we were growing frustrated. While we waited, we focused on what we could control, planning and gaining approval for a boundary wall, classified as minor works, allowing us to begin sooner. We also built a proper side toilet, which connected directly to the newly repaired sewer line. Given the steepness of our land, the wall needed to be solid to retain all that soil, and was a shared venture with the neighbor. Once built, we'd lose digger access via the adjacent plot, so we prioritized finishing all earthworks as soon as possible. On February 6, 2024, we finally broke ground. After just a few days of digging, the land looked far less daunting. Elena designed the house to follow the natural contours, so despite the steep plot, only minimal excavation was needed to level the footprint. A few large rocks remained, which needed jackhammering. The rest were rolled down and neatly packed along the river's edge as a breakwater for future floods. We appointed our engineer and continued waiting for the final plan approval. Finally, on April 26th, our house plans were approved, and in May, construction of the boundary wall began in earnest. It finally felt like progress. I left again for a yachting gig in Germany from July to September, this time at a shipyard in Bremerhaven. We knew we would need more cash, and a small yachting gig would help immensely. The boundary wall was completed while I was away, but not without drama. It had been evident during surveys that our existing neighbours had overbuilt onto our land years ago. With space being so tight, we couldn't work around it. Let's just say good fences make good neighbours, and we had fence issues. I'll leave it at that. Nevertheless, we felt lucky to have completed our earthworks and boundary wall when we did. Had we started any later, access would have been blocked, and the whole project would likely have become too expensive. By September 2024, exactly 1 year after the Great Flood, our foundations were finally prepared. We had ended up having to dig down more than expected, as the earth had been used as a bit of a dumping site over the years, and we needed to find solid earth before we could pour. Everything was taking far longer than promised, and tensions began to rise. Elaine's father, our builder, was stretched thin between multiple sites. We lost a lot of time, and stress levels grew. Originally, we'd hoped to have an intimate wedding at the house in March of the next year, but that quickly became unachievable. Large steel boxes would need to be cast in as part of the cantilever balcony. Due to building regs and the floodline, we could not build on stilts and could only create a balcony space if it is suspended over the floodline. The foundations would be partially on solid ground and partially floating over the steep land, not a simple excavation and pour, and we needed quite a bit of steel. Our engineer was immensely helpful during all of this. The state of the site at the time was not very orderly, and the German yachty within struggled with the chaos, especially in comparison to our neighbour, who was already ready for his roof. To be fair, we always knew getting out the ground would be the hardest part, and sure enough, it was. The concrete arrived and was poured with a large pump, a very expensive pump. Unfortunately, the expensive pump was not long enough to fully reach the steel box foundations, and as no formwork was built to secure the steel, they were all blown out of position. The rest of the foundations were poured thick, and the concrete bill got a little out of hand. Elaine always does pacify me a bit though, and reassured me that having a thick foundation is a good thing. As the foundation walls rose, we received complaints about our height. Unfortunately, due to the steep slope and the need for garage access from the street, the design had to be as it was. All neighbours had been informed during the waiver application process months ago, and no objections were made. As our plans were approved by council, there was no need to stress. Nevertheless, we felt disheartened by the constant conflict from all sides, and almost felt unwelcome. Even now, I'd love to know how the complainants would have done it differently if they were working with our land. Situations like this remind me why I went to sea in the first place. We were doing everything by the book, minding our own business, and still, words come to mind, but let's move on. We spent a lot of time on site checking everything, and were gutted to discover several walls that were not straight. 1 step forwards and 3 steps back. We were wasting time and funds. After more delays, we finally got the foundation walls filled and compacted. As mentioned before, half of the ground floor slab would be directly on the earth, and half would be suspended. Everything had to be perfect. Working on a steep slope adds a huge labour cost component to a build, as everything has to be carried up and down. The ramp and a few makeshift slides made life easier getting things down, but taking stuff out was the biggest problem.